The following conversations are taken from our channel membership exclusive weekly live show that we do on Saturdays from 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time called Members Talk Live. Find out how you can become a member and appear on the show. All of the information is down in the description below, as well as all of the links to the channels of today's guests. Check them out, and I hope to talk with you very soon. Today, we are discussing X-Men in the MCU. Should they join the universe, or is this they knew that they could, but they never stopped to think if they should, to quote Ian Malcolm a little bit there. And to discuss this with me, we've got Frank from Optimistic Forever. What's going on, man?
Hey, we're staying strong, right?
Staying strong. We had a little bit of a hiccup this morning,
Yeah.
but the show must go on, and the show goes on indeed.
Exactly. As it should.
As it should. Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for being here today. Discuss this with me. So I guess we'll just go back when Disney was buying Fox, who owned all the X-Men rights, right? Do you remember how you were feeling about that before the deal went through? Were you rooting for Disney to buy Fox? Were you hoping that that wasn't going to go through? What were you feeling about that? And how did it relate to the X-Men?
Oh, yeah, no, I remember, and mind you, this was around the time when I was already like just being absorbed into the franchise right before Endgame. Just learning a lot about the movies and learning about where things are at, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I also came to realize, like, oh wait, so are the mutants around? Because I know Wanda's there. I know Pietro like showed up in Age of Ultron for that
Yeah.
movie only.
And they were very
Uh
careful not to call them mutants for like the longest time.
and that was another thing, like not even the word just uttered at all in anywhere in the MCU. And I'm like, okay, so is the Fox movie still connected? There were so many questions, and that's when everything started to make sense about how Disney did not have the rights yet and that they were
Yeah.
working through the deal. And then finally it happened. It was announced in 2019, and I was just overjoyed. Like I was looking forward to, like, already my head was just exploding with speculations and theories and all this of like how this is going to come about. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I remember even like when the Infinity War trailer came out and they did a close up on Thanos' face and he had like three scars here. And there
Hmm.
was like this whole internet theory that was running rapid that Wolverine was going to appear in Infinity War and he's the one that gave Thanos the scratches. And it was like based on like no merits whatsoever. But people were convinced that that was what was going to happen. And I just remember like there was so much hype around when are the X-Men going to show up? When are the X-Men going to show up? And then when they finally had this opportunity to buy Fox, they were like, the fandom was like, now's the chance. We are going to get the X-Men in the MCU. So when you were watching the MCU, I know that you came into it a little bit later, pretty recently actually. Were you ever craving the X-Men to show up in the MCU? What is your experience with X-Men? Do you know them from the comics? Do you just know them from the 97 cartoon or
Ever since, I mean, as I said, I think I talked about this before in the first live. But
you were really big in the
my
movies?
limit as right, exactly.
Yeah.
My limit, as far as like being a Marvel fan, was only towards like the X-Men and Spider-Man. Nothing else beyond that. And I was first exposed to that after I've seen X2 United,
Yeah,
and that
man.
was oof. That was it was quite an age. And so after that, I've seen the animated series X-Men Evolution, and then I got into the classic animation. Um, that my uncle had only one set DVD of the first three seasons, I believe, and I watched that. So and then later on, I didn't read much the comic books, so I wasn't too familiar with like the arcs or like Weapon X or House of M even. That came a little bit later.
Yeah,
Um,
I found out about House of
and
M like 3 years ago. So I'm right
yeah,
there with you, man.
exactly. Actually, and House of M was the first arc that I was able to like read through. the main, and right now that stands as like my favorite comic book arc for all the arcs that I've read so far.
Nice, man. So,
Yeah.
I guess now flash forward, we are now in phase 5 of the MCU. We're just starting phase 5. The the culture and the talk and stuff about the MCU has changed from when Disney first bought Fox. And I know that X-Men is coming in the MCU. Like that's been confirmed. It's been talked about. Kevin Feige's talked about it. Deadpool 3 is bringing Hugh Jackman's Wolverine back. Deadpool is confirmed to be in the MCU. A lot of craziness, a lot of excitement happening. Um, do you feel the same excitement for the X-Men in the MCU as you did before when they bought Fox, or has it changed for you a little bit because of where the MCU is at today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off with a straight out simple answer. I mean, I still am. Ever since I mean, ever since way back, even before COVID, Deadpool 3 has been confirmed, and Ryan has been confirmed to, do the screenplay. He spent his entire time, even during COVID, just writing up the script. From what I've known, he's taken some months off. And those like small, tiny bit of news and rumors, like it's what's still giving me hope. And even with the leaks that just occurred weeks ago with Hugh Jackman and them on set filming Deadpool 3, like it still proves that this is still happening.
Yeah.
And it's for many fans. I find it very surprising that most fans that even if they're just X-Men fans, are not talking about it. I mean, I'm finding that they're not talking about it as much, and I feel like this should at least, deserves to be validated still, regardless of the state that the MCU is in right now. Um, I mean, that's just my take.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from because, like, I do feel like the excitement has died down a little bit. I still feel like it's there. I still feel like people are anticipating when are the X-Men going to. I mean, you just look at WandaVision and when Evan Peters showed up as well, we
Hmm.
thought he was showing up as Quicksilver from the Fox universe. Turns out that wasn't the case. It was a stupid dick joke, which I still get mad about. It's so ridiculous that because
Yeah.
they know that we are going to read into that so much. When they casted him, they knew what they were doing. Such a bait and switch, such a tease. I hated it, but at the same time, I respected it. But
Oh yeah, and we still need answers. We still
I
need
know,
answers.
right? I don't think
Oh
it's over. It's got to
no.
play into the multiverse somehow, right? I mean, I don't know. It just seems weird that they would cast him and then do that to us. It's so mean. But
Oh,
anyways,
gosh, I just also find it like completely random, because it was a random twist, like one of those WTF moments that we come across, and then we sort of tolerate it, but at the same time, it really ticks us because, like, okay, Evan Peters, like, this was all for comedy purpose. I mean, the name itself, which by the way, I feel like I'm the only one who always argues that, okay, it's not pronounced Boner, it's pronounced Bonner.
Bonner.
Bonner. Yes,
Ralph
Bonner. So if
Boner.
anybody hears me, it's Bonner. And now I want to see Evan Peters' character like get so pissed when they refer to him as Boner. So just putting that out there.
Do you think they're ever going to bring him back? I guess that's a little bit of a tangent, but do you think that he'll ever come back?
Uh, I mean, I feel like about 50-50. I have expected, well, right now I really can't keep my hopes up. With the Marvels coming up, I can kind of picture um where he would show up as this, like, like let's say he's the guy who was in the witness protection program, but really he was working for like Nick Fury, and that he would probably show up as somewhere
Mm.
in Saber as this really geeky tech guy who was positioned on Earth and Westview to, like, figure out what was going on, but then the hex happened and he got stuck there, and that's it. But I mean, that's just my speculation.
It's good speculation, man.
I
So
know.
I guess we can jump into the question now, because the reason I was asking this question is, like I mentioned
Mhm.
before, the MCU is in a much different place than it was when Disney bought Fox and they got their X-Men characters back. Um, I get the first part of this question I think we should ask is it too overcrowded already in the MCU for the X-Men? Because you bring in the X-Men, you're bringing in hundreds, if not even thousands of characters. Even new characters like Ms. Marvel was originally an Inhuman. They're making her a mutant, and thus they're making her an X-Men. So, I mean, we're already at a place now where we've got so many heroes. It already is starting to feel kind of cluttered, even in the universe. It's kind of hard to keep track of where everybody is even now. Do you think bringing the X-Men in is a smart choice, or do you think it's more of a we feel obligated to do this because these are our characters that people love? But do you think it's ultimately going to be too crowded? How are you feeling about that at the moment?
Yeah, no, and that's a good question. I honest with everything that Marvel Studios has given us in our trays, I think this is what they've been trying so hard to like walk around and like being very careful as to like how they are approaching, this side that we've all been expecting, because they've also had these other great ideas as far as like other characters in Marvel comics that to also bring in. And you know, I think for Miss Marvel, for example, who's been introduced who's been introduced as like the first mutant, and now we have Namor, and then there was
Right.
Professor,
Namor.
yeah, and then there's Professor X who showed up in Multiverse of Madness. So there's these little like breadcrumbs that they've been trying to leave out, and it's and it's so funny because it's like Marvel's way of reminding us like, hey guys, we still remember the mutants. Don't worry. See, they're slowly coming. So I think they're being very patient, and they're asking us to be patient with them. That's the way I see it. But also, like, this is in the place that we're at where it's become overwhelming, and
Hmm.
I can understand for viewers, for fans, with all these homeworks that they have, they worried like, how hyped can they still be, when Deadpool 3, rolls in, or any other indications that the mutants are slowly showing up in these other upcoming projects like Agatha or Ironheart or Cap
Yeah.
4. Yeah.
Well, that's a good question too. I mean, do you think they should slowly, because they kind of, like you've mentioned, they've kind of been doing that. They've been slowly, one by one. Here's Namor, he's a mutant. Here's Miss Marvel, mutant. Professor X in another multiverse, he's a mutant. Do you think that they should continue to gradually do that with characters, or do you think that we should just drop them all, like bang, X-Men, here we go?
Right. Um, I know. Gosh, I mean that'd be awesome if they would just be spontaneous and surprise us in such way. But
Yeah, well, that's the thing too,
uh,
right? It's like when we think of X Men, and I think Deadpool 3 has also been doing this, is we're picturing like Hugh Jackman, we're picturing Patrick Stewart, right? When in reality,
mhm.
the MCU X Men won't be the Fox X Men; it'll be a bunch of brand new characters and actors as the
Yeah,
characters, and it also goes back to also the origins of the X Men. Like it's hard to picture them always being around in the Marvel Cinematic Universe based on what we've seen, but at the same time, they they kind of have to be with
they
with the
do.
history of
Yeah.
the X-Men, right? How do you think that do you think they can do that in the MCU at this point, rewrite history or even just explain history to a point that we would believe it?
Yeah, no, that's an even tougher question to even grasp. And we could spend, I mean, I could spend hours on end and skip lunch and dinner just to indulge in that
Yeah.
discussion, really. Because this has me thinking of even the first issue of the Uncanny X-Men, where you got Beast, you have Cyclops already established, and Marvel Girl, aka Jean, and Angel and Iceman. So, you know, I I feel like I'm not the only one who's like keeping an eye out on like, okay, which one of these guys is going to be introduced. Like it could just be this minor role where this actor or actress was casted, um, and everybody will know. Like comic book fans will know. You and I will know.
Yeah.
A lot of folks will know, and that's that's gonna light up the fire, for the mutant fans. Um, may it light up the fire, to finally follow through with everything that they throw at us from Marvel Studios? Maybe. So yeah, it's all
Yeah.
going to depend on how everything's going to be falling into place, really.
Well, going with your point about lighting a fire with the mutant fans, Austin in the chat here is asking: Is Spider-Man technically an X-Men or a mutant? I remember that weird '90s crossover, and it felt more like filler to me. I don't think Spider-Man's an X-Men because
Mm,
he's not born a mutant. He was given mutant powers from
correct.
a spider, right? But bringing up Spider-Man, when Spider-Man entered the MCU, which on like I have really little problems with Spider-Man in the MCU, but when he was introduced in Homecoming, a lot of Spider-Man fans, they didn't show Uncle Ben getting killed. They gave him Tony Stark tech for a lot of the time, and it really rubbed OG Spider-Man fans the wrong way. Bringing in the X-Men, a lot of their history, Magneto being the father of Wanda. I don't know if you can do that retroactively. I mean, we even saw, I
Yeah.
think they showed us Wanda's father in WandaVision with a flashback to her as a little kid, and it was clearly not Magneto. So, scratch that unless you're somehow going to retcon that. And,
Hmm.
like Wolverine being around since World War II, how did he never interact with Cap? Like, there's so many things um, within the X-Men's, history that I feel like if you put them into the MCU, you've got to neglect a lot of it. And with hardcore fans, I mean, do you think that's going to go over well?
Ooh, and Wanda's history is so complex. I find it to be very complex, and I would constantly ask, like, how will they incorporate that in what way, shape, or form? I mean, one would say like, okay, well, the whole rumor about this Scarlet Witch solo project, like, is it going to happen there, or is it going to happen in Agatha, Coven of Chaos? Like that, that would be interesting. Because really, if they're gonna retcon that and say like, well, uh, her and her brother were adopted, by this Sokovian family, and so um, I mean, I honestly don't know that it could go many ways.
And like I said, like that's one of the reasons why I'm asking this question is because yes, I think we're all excited for the past X-Men to show up in Deadpool 3. I think we're very excited for that. I think the concept of the X-Men coming into the MCU, especially when it was first announced, was very exciting and a lot of people were looking forward to it. But we're just at a place now in the MCU, I feel like it just might get too convoluted and too confusing. And I almost feel like they shouldn't do it, honestly. I almost feel
Mm,
like somehow they should find a way to make them solo or put them somewhere else. I don't know. I'll,
mm,
I'll ask you, and then we'll move on to Ken from See for Yourself. But do you think
yeah.
it's better to have them in the MCU or in their own solo universe? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, there's this other piece of rumor, that even after Secret Wars, like Kevin Feige has this plan about just creating like this saga where it's only about the mutants, which, like, okay, brilliant. And I think it kind of goes back to what I said, where they really should be careful about making it seem like, okay, this is the multiverse saga. It's also gonna incorporate a portion of the X-Men because we want to introduce them. And you're right, because it is gonna be a whole other dessert that we just cannot handle, because then we'll get bad stomach ache, and we just can't.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Sometimes too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Right, right. So, I totally understand where you're coming from. I mean, as much as I really would love to see, Xavier School like just pop up out of nowhere and surprise me, um, I also got to think about like, okay, well, everybody else who loves these other characters and these other stories, like now they're gonna have to like really love this because this is gonna serve so well in Secret Wars.
Yeah, no, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how they handle it. But man, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you chatting with me about this, man. So tell the people where they can find you, and then we're gonna bring on Ken.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody can find me on Optimistic Forever. That's with the number 4. And I also make reviews of movies and TV shows. I just uploaded The Last Voyage of the Demeter. And so that's up and running. And that's all I got.
Perfect, man. Well, we'll talk again soon, okay?
Awesome.
You have a great weekend.
Yeah. You as well. Take care.
You too. All right, and let's bring on Ken. What's going on,
How's it
man?
going, man?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, good. Sorry I was late, man. I was just there's a ton of stuff going on. My 7-year wedding anniversary is coming up this week, so we're packing up
Woo!
to take a trip down to South Carolina. So, a lot
That's
of stuff going
awesome.
on. Yep.
Well, congratulations to you guys. That's awesome.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Been a
so
good 7 years.
that's awesome. I mean, I'm actually almost 3. In November it'll be 3 years.
Nice.
So it's
That's what's
crazy how
up.
fast it goes.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So X-Men. What's your history with X-Men, man? What like where did you first get introduced to them? And
Sure.
even who's your favorite X-Men?
So yeah, I was introduced to X-Men back in the 90s with the X-Men animated series, which has the greatest animated intro of all time, the best music of all time. Yeah, and that's when I really got to know that's when I really got to know all of the individual X-Men. My favorite X-Men is hard to say. The default almost feels like Wolverine, but there's so many different X-Men, so many different X-Men that it's really hard to just choose one. So yeah, Wolverine for sure. Just because I'm an action movie guy, if that makes any sense, I like to see those types of fights and stuff like that. And then there's Storm as well. Storm is just an incredible, majestic character who I am in love with. Like the things that she can do, especially in the most recent comics, they're really showcasing all of her power, and it's just been magnificent to watch her evolution in the comics. So yeah, so those would definitely be my 2 favorites. She was very dramatic. Everybody in the X-Men cartoon was dramatic, but she was very thy thunder come. It was like, ma'am, it's okay.
Well,
it's all right, but yeah, but that was just the way. Jean would faint, and Storm would give a speech, and Cyclops would be going through some existential crisis, and Wolverine would try to convince himself that he didn't need anybody. It was the same thing every week, but it was great.
Well, I mean, nothing compares to Halle Berry's. You know what happens to a Toad when it gets struck by lightning?
The same thing that happens to everything else.
Everything else.
Yeah.
Yep. Classic. Iconic. How'd you come up with that?
God.
I mean, seriously.
I
where did that come
don't know how they let that fly. I really don't.
Yeah. 1999. Was it 1999? I guess
no, that was 2000.
2000. Yeah. 2000 was a different time for comic
Yeah, it was.
movies.
But even so, man, those movies were good. Like the first 2 especially. Like for what they were, for what we had at the time, they were really good. They were really good stories. And I think that, you just have to look at it as like just a multiversal story. Like I look at every different iteration of characters just as like not a multiverse as in it's connected, but as its own thing, I should say.
Right.
So I look at that like it's its own thing.
Well, I mean, especially nowadays, it's so easy to do that. You can just look at Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man as a different universe in their franchise. And I personally, like, as a nerd, I find that awesome that the studios have kind of made that possible. And we can buy into that a lot more, that just every franchise is just a different universe out there now.
Yeah.
So when it comes to X-Men, it sounds like you were a fan of the Fox movies.
Yeah, I was. The first 2 for sure. And then there's bits and pieces after that. So the
Yep.
first two, the third one we don't talk about. First Class is good. Days of Future Past is my favorite X-Men
Yeah,
movie.
man, that's
Period.
great.
It's so damn good. And it's so weird because it's stuck in the middle of a bunch of other stuff that's not as good. And for some reason, that particular movie worked so well. And then it's followed by Apocalypse and whatever the hell the aliens were doing on that train. So
Dark
there,
Phoenix.
there was a lot. Yeah, Dark Phoenix. There was a lot of stuff that's like sometimes I look at it as like a sports score. Like if you ever not score, but if you ever like watch sports and you know every team has a record. I think if I recall, X-Men are like 7-5. So they have a winning record, but there's still like a lot of bad stuff in there. And I include Deadpool in that too. So yeah.
All right. So, as a fan of X-Men, the Fox movies,
Mhm.
when it was possible, forget when they actually bought it, but when the idea came about that Disney could actually acquire Fox and thus the MCU could acquire the X-Men characters, how were you feeling about that at the time?
It was exciting. It was really exciting. I've wanted the X-Men to interact with these characters, since forever. Like I've always wanted like Feige to have all of his toys back, including Spider-Man, but they worked out a really good deal to make that work. So I was happy with that.
Yeah, phenomenal
Um,
deal.
yeah, and then you also get the Fantastic Four back with Fox as well, and then that opens up Silver Surfer, and it opens up so many other things that you can do with these characters that don't just pertain to X-Men, but at the same time, the X-Men are a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like, now we're in a place now with the MCU where we weren't exactly at when they bought Fox. I mean, a big reason I was excited for them to get the X-Men characters, I think, did have to do a lot with Dark Phoenix. That was
Yeah,
just
yeah, like,
that
hey,
being
it's time. It's
yeah,
time to
that being
time
the
to give it
last
up.
X-Men film they did. It was like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, then you had like stuff like Logan, which was phenomenal. Which,
Logan
like,
was great.
if they were in the MCU, you would not have gotten a Logan. Like, we're not going to
No,
get another Logan as long as they're in the MCU, and I truly believe that, which is unfortunate.
no, that's
Um,
accurate.
yeah. So now we're at a place now in the MCU, like I was discussing with Frank. They don't feel like they have a handle on things as well as they did when they first were acquiring Fox and where
I
the
would
MCU
agree.
was at that time. We've got a lot of stuff going on right now. We've got a lot of characters, a lot of new characters that we're getting introduced to that honestly, I would say they're having trouble with getting the audience on board with. I don't think any of the new characters that they've introduced, or at least not many of them, have really caught on with the audience as much as the previous phase characters have.
Yeah,
So in this
and there's a
time that
reason for
we're
that.
in the
Sorry.
context of the MCU right now,
Mhm.
how are you feeling about the X-Men coming in?
So for me, I wouldn't want the X-Men to come into this version of the MCU. And
Right.
the reason why I say that is because not just despite all the new characters and the struggle to get those characters to connect with the current audience, I don't want the X-Men introduced into an MCU where they'll never meet Iron Man or Cap or the Avengers in general.
Good
So
point.
there's so many different interactions that we're going to miss out on. We're going to miss out on Captain America and Cyclops debates and arguments and working together and all those other things. We're going to miss Wolverine joining the X-Men, because in the comics Wolverine is a part of 50 different teams at the same time somehow. So there's all these different dynamics that we'll miss out on in these relationships that we're going to miss out on, where a big part of the X-Men's history is their struggle with the other superheroes not supporting them as much. So,
Yeah.
and most of those are like the major players. And right now, we don't really have any major players. We have a lot. It would be disrespectful to call them reserves, but they don't have the same gravitas as Cap and Iron Man and even Thor. So, with all those characters gone, it's going to be very strange to have the X-Men come in as these huge characters and then try to team up with Shang-Chi, who I love, and Miss Marvel and all these other characters who are kind of they feel second string is the issue.
Right.
It would be like Beyonce touring with a brand new artist and she's the headliner, but it's supposed to like they're both supposed to like headline this tour. And it's like, how is she headlining with her. That doesn't make any sense. She just got here, and she's not even that great of an artist. She's a good artist, but yeah. So it's kind of
Right.
like that situation.
So do you think you were more excited for the X-Men to come in? Let's say when the idea of that was possible during Phase 3, because they had all those hard hitting heroes still around, because it was before Endgame, right? That it was announced that the X-Men were coming into the MCU, so there
Right.
was that thought of like, oh, with Iron Man, with Captain America, Thor's still around, luckily, but
Yeah,
now that they're gone, has that lessened your excitement for them coming into the MCU?
absolutely. It would be hard for me to be as excited for the X-Men to come in, like I said, with the kind of a second string characters. And yeah, at the time I was really excited because I was excited for the Cap and Cyclops and the Cap and Wolverine situation and all these characters who I would love to see interact, and even like a Professor X interacting with Nick Fury, like just this whole different, all these things I just said to me sound like things I would want to see on screen. But as
Yeah.
of right now, I mean, Nick Fury is still around. But as of right now, none of those things can take place. And even the Guardians are gone. So there's none of that. Like you could imagine a Guardians of a team up where the X-Men are fighting against the Shi'ar Empire, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy are a part of that because they're just around in space and stuff like that. But the Guardians just broke up. So it's kind of like,
Right.
you're bringing the X-Men in to a universe that is, the cupboard is pretty bare. The Fantastic Four will be here as well, so that could be interesting, but we don't have all of our characters, which is why I believe that there should just be a hard reboot and a hard reset.
Yeah.
And there's
No,
other reasons why I believe that as well. But
I think there's very many reasons why I agree with you on that, because you kind of mentioned the Fantastic Four, and that kind of brings you to another point. A lot of teams. There's going to be a lot of teams in the MCU now. We're going to have the Avengers, which we still haven't found out who the Avengers are going to be.
right.
We're going to have Fantastic Four. I believe we're going to have some variation of the Guardians. The fact that they kept Rocket and Groot around, they can use those models and CGI them any place they want to put them, and get Bradley Cooper and reuse takes from Vin Diesel till the moon explodes. I
Right.
believe we're going to see characters come back from the Guardians, so that's going to be another group. Then you're also going to have the X-Men, which, I mean, the X-Men themselves could habitate their own cinematic universe.
Correct.
There are
Yeah.
so many X-Men, and we're already at a point in the MCU where I feel personally that they are starting to get a little bit overcrowded. They are bringing in a lot of characters. I feel like they are struggling to juggle them as well as they did in the previous phases, because there's just such an abundance of them. Now you're going to open the floodgates and bring in like decades worth of characters. How do you see that going, just as a fan?
So I heard you mention that earlier. Sorry. I heard you mention that earlier, and I kind of disagree with you in terms of the amount of characters that there are. We
Okay.
lost a lot of characters with the end of Phase 3, including, like, not story wise, but including T'Challa, or Chadwick Boseman. So
Yeah.
we saw a lot of our major players, like I keep mentioning, are gone. So even though it feels like there are a lot of characters, there's not a lot of characters that feel like they take up a lot of space. Right? There's a lot of characters that you can kind of see kind of being in excuse me, kind of being in the background or coming in for guest spots, so to speak. So
Right.
I don't think that the MCU is that crowded. And I also believe that the reason why it doesn't feel that crowded in a sense is because the MCU has not done a good job, as you mentioned before, of integrating these characters into the main universe. I mean, think about Moon Knight. He's over on Disney Plus, and so is Miss Marvel. Even though she's going to be in a movie in a couple months, she's still over on Disney Plus. Then you have the Halloween special and Man Thing and all of them. They're over there, right? So I think one of the biggest issues that the MCU has is that they separated their concerns, or they separated their characters. So all these characters that people have to get used to, a lot of people in the general public are not even aware of them or aware of their history. So I think the biggest issue is the way that the MCU has constructed their new universe, where
Yeah.
I know a lot of comic book fans feel as though we're the people who drive everything, but comic book fans don't have billions of dollars. The general public does. those are the people who say, "Oh, look, the shiny thing, the thing, yeah," and they're flying and they're doing the thing. The general public isn't on YouTube talking like us, doing the research. They see something they like and they go buy it, and they're
Yeah.
not super nerds like us. So I think that those are the people who you really need to connect to, and that's what the MCU did a good job of beforehand.
Right. So to your point, because they are very good points. Um, Do you feel like the characters on Disney Plus though are over there for good, or do you feel like they're just over there for now? Because the reason why I think that there is an abundance of characters right now is like if you look at phases 1, 2, and 3, they did have
Mhm.
a lot of secondary characters, but they were very clear of who was the forefront. You know, Iron Man,
Right.
Captain America, Thor, even like Black Widow was a little bit in there as well. But like you kind of always knew who the face of the MCU was. And then they brought in like Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and Black Panther
Right.
near the tail end of phase 3. But for
Mhm.
the majority of the time, it was those characters that we could latch on to. Now we're kind of at a point where, like you mentioned before, we lost those characters. Unfortunately, we lost T'Challa for real life unfortunate reasons.
Yeah.
We've lost Iron Man, we've lost Captain America, Thor. We've kind of lost in terms of character,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
now they're like, okay, Shang-Chi might be the face of. Oh, but it looks like they're trying to push Miss Marvel now. But then you've got Doctor Strange in there as well, and then we
Right.
also have Shuri who's coming up. She might be in there as well. Ant-Man's still kicking around. He's an OG, so is he still going to be like? It just feels like there's not so much of a focus on the main people of the MCU as there was before, and now
Right.
you're talking about bringing in 4 more with Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, The Thing, which are all popular characters in their own right, let alone
Right.
as a group. And then you're also bringing in X-Men characters that are all popular. And then you're also like, it's just a lot, I think, in
Mhm.
my opinion. And so that's what I was kind of meaning when I was saying like, it's just so many. It's just an overabundance. It's almost like who exactly are we focusing on? Because like, yeah,
Right.
Iron Man and Captain America, they had the through line stories. If you watch, everyone did, but the main
Yep.
ones were Iron Man and Captain America. From Iron Man to Endgame, they have their through line stories. Who's getting the through line story in this current MCU? It's very unclear where it's going at the moment.
Exactly. So I think that one of the biggest issues with the MCU right now is exactly what you just mentioned. And I think that the reason why that is such a big issue is because of the Disney Plus stuff. I know the first question you asked is, do you think they're going to stay over there? No, I don't think they're going to stay over there. But I feel like the fact that they started over there just makes a hurdle for everyone who's years behind and is trying to catch up with the MCU and feels as though they need to watch this 6 episode series and this 6 episode series,
Yeah.
this 8 episode series. I think that's a lot to ask of anyone, especially if you're trying to like speed run it and do it right before a movie comes out. Like I know when me and my wife first started dating was around the time the first Avengers movie came out. And it was literally the night before. She hadn't seen any of it. We watched Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America. We didn't bother with Iron Man 2 and right the night before the movie. So then when she saw it, she knew everything that was going on. You can't do that with 4, 5, 9, actually 6 to 8 episode series. That's
No.
not possible. So, and the other thing, as I mentioned before, like my dad, right? My dad is 60 years old. He's not going to Disney Plus to do six
Yeah.
episode series. The fact that you had everything in the theaters for a 2 hour commitment is so much easier than sending someone to Disney Plus for that reason. So with the X-Men to the latter part of your point, it's I don't want to say it's impossible. I think that it's impossible to integrate the X-Men in a satisfactory way because of their history. Their history
Yeah.
is tied. Magneto's history is tied to the Holocaust. He's
That's
way
a
too
great
old for
point.
that.
That's a
And a
fantastic
big
point.
part of the X-Men is the discrimination that they face. Like that is
Hmm.
one of the biggest themes there, right? So if you bring in the X-Men now, in a world where superheroes have existed for 10, 15 years, you say, hey, look, there's X-Men. And he's like, oh, we don't like them, but we do like these superheroes because they're mutants. But we don't like them because they're mutants. But we do like Spider-Man because he got bitten by a radioactive spider, which I don't even know if the general public even knows. So it's kind of like this thing where, well, why would you discriminate against them, but not them? And they're both doing the same. So you would rather have that history baked in through history of that
Yep.
world rather than try to integrate them and then try to make people discriminatory against them. It's just such a weird. You would want the X-Men to have always been there, essentially. So that's why I think that that's another reason why I feel like they should reboot, because if you're trying to bring all that in later on, it's going to be very hard for the audience to believe that they're just being discriminated against because they're the new superheroes on the block.
Yeah.
It'll be a very strange thing. And then, like I said, with Magneto, you'll probably have to move him up to. I think even the Vietnam War might be too.
Yeah, but do you
So
think like
it's that kind of
like,
thing.
that's a great point too? Because like, do you think that fans like I think the general audience will be fine if they execute it properly, but
Mhm.
like fans in general, do you think they'll be okay with like the history changing that much? And also to your point that I just thought about,
Yeah.
which I think also goes to show like how many characters there are because I forgot. Um, yeah, what's the difference between these mutants and the Eternals? You know, because the Eternals, they could very well be seen as mutants. I mean, they
Right.
have natural abilities and powers apparently. So like how like yeah, it's just that's what I'm getting at with this question, right? Is like
Right.
when you look at the overall universe and you look at these characters and how would they fit into it, is it gonna work? Like
Yeah. I have a hard time believing that it can work in the way. I have a hard time believing that it's going to be able to work in the timeline that we're currently in. Now,
right.
there is one way that it could work, which is Secret Wars, which is the X Men having never been on this planet in the first place, and then Secret Wars. They've always existed on this other universe. So when Secret Wars happens and an incursion happens, which is essentially two Earths crashing together,
Mhm.
um, all those characters can come in to the new Earth that's created and pretty much reset everything. That's how they got Miles Morales out of the Ultimate Universe into the main universe. That they made a whole event around doing just
Right.
that. So I think that it's very not simple, but I think that that's a good way to do that, where they had going through discrimination over there, and not only superheroes will be merged over, but regular people would be as well. So it will just be a new Earth where you can bring those problems over here. So that is one way in which you could do it, and you can essentially just explain it as history's been rewritten. This is a brand new start. All these characters are combined now on the same Earth, and you can even do that with the Fantastic Four as well, because the Fantastic Four, their whole thing is we weren't here when the big thing was happening. Like they're
Right.
always in space doing something that they have no business doing, and then bringing that calamity back to Earth. So that's a very easy way to explain why why they hadn't been here for the snap and all that stuff. It's because they were out in some micro universe, and Reed Richards was doing something he had no business doing. So that
Yeah.
because that's the Fantastic Four story. So yeah, I think that that's one way it could work.
Yeah, it sounds like similar to what Dark Movies in here is saying. What if because of the multiverse and when it kind of broke, it pulled the X-Men into the MCU? Yeah.
That's a perfect explanation for it. And if you remember at the end of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Clea comes in, she says, "Hey, look, you effed all this stuff up.
Yep.
Now there are incursions happening, so they've already introduced that language, and now we have to go resolve it." So he just, I guess, leaves Earth, doesn't pay bills anymore, and just goes and deals with that. And the next time we see Doctor Strange, I'm expecting him to have experienced a whole bunch of different stuff that he's going to be able to explain to us why these things have happened. I'm completely guessing, but
Right.
that would make sense.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like your stance would be um reboot the MCU universe and
Yeah.
then make the central focus of this new universe the X-Men and have them be the focus
It,
of that
they don't
universe.
have to be the central focus, because I think that once you do reintroduce or once you do reboot it, you can cast a new Captain America, you can cast a new Iron Man, you can cast all these characters again, recast all these characters, and have your
Oh,
X-Men movie and
okay.
have all your other movies as well. I don't think that you need to take one out just to deal with another one. However, I think you mentioned earlier the X-Men could be a universe unto themselves. and that's very legitimate. I mean, you're talking about Savage Land and Mojo World and discrimination and whatever Mr. Sinister is doing with the experimentation. Like they go through so much stuff that
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. What the time travel? I think they're the most well versed character. I think that that team and that franchise, so to speak, is the most well versed in all the different types of calamities that you can come across because they just Phoenix Saga. Like there's so many things, aliens, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even Namor's an Atlantean, so they got that covered as well, or Talakan. Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah, I definitely like that's what I like about the Fox X-Men movies, I think a lot, is they do work so well because they're their only superheroes or only
right.
like superpowered people in that world. So it makes sense
Hmm.
that people would fear them. But it goes back to like what you were saying, like in the current MCU, there's just so many heroes that look like they have natural abilities to the naked eye or people that are just seeing them for the first time, that why would the X-Men be any different? So
Right.
it's gonna be interesting to see what they do, how they do
Yeah.
this, and how they handle it.
Yeah, and then with Miss Marvel being a mutant, what does that mean? I mean, I'm okay with it. I'm cool with it, but it's just kind of like, okay, so she's a mutant. All right, so mutants have always been here. Is that what you're telling me? So it's kind of like,
Yes,
what's happening here?
that was very. That's what I was thinking too. I was like, is this supposed to be like the beginning of the mutant gene?
Right, and
In
then you
which
got
case,
Namor,
but
thousands of
if
years
it,
old.
yeah, exactly right, because it can't be the beginning because otherwise you don't have a Professor Charles Xavier because he
Right.
needs to like it's yeah I don't know. It's gonna
But
be
the problem is
very
that they
interesting.
played the like they played the X Men theme.
Yes, they did.
So it's kind of like, so what are you guys saying exactly?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which I mean, see,
And we don't
that's kind
know.
of where I'm coming out with this too. Is like
Mhm.
does it feel like the MCU is even ready to tackle something like the mutants with like the X-Men
No,
right now? It doesn't feel like they're at a position where they have a full handle on what they are doing. They
right.
feel like they want to do so much right now that I feel like putting X-Men into this as well is just like they're trying to set up Eternals. They're trying to and it's a lot. It's just so
Yeah,
much going on.
yeah, it is a lot, and I agree with you, especially with considering the Eternals and the X Men. In the first three phases, where there was a singular focus, which was keep the stones from Thanos in a roundabout way, whether they knew it or not. Everybody was Earth based, and everybody was
Yeah.
dealing with regular old bad guy stuff until Thanos kind of came about. But if everything's a big deal, then it's very hard for you to resolve all of those big deals, all of those big events. Like, because Arishem the judge said, I'm coming back to judge Earth. When is that happening? Like, when's that on the schedule?
It's a
So it's
very good
kind of
point.
like, and the fact that these phase five and phase six are supposed to all happen within, like, in our reality,
Yeah.
2 years. It's kind of like, guys, I don't think that that's I don't think that's smart.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Well, look, I really enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed you popping
Likewise.
up and chatting about this with me. Tell people where they can find you, and then we'll call this episode a day.
Awesome. So yeah, so my name is Ken. The channel I run is called See for Yourself. You can find me just by searching for me. It's C4 as you would spell it, and then YASELF. Right. So you can find me there. I'm actually doing a marathon right now where I watch one movie for every year between 1970 to present. This week is going to be our 1971 movie, which is Shaft. The subscribers and just regular people, the subscribers vote on the next year's movie every week. So I would love to have your vote, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for Zach. Thank you so much, Zach, for having me. Can't talk today, and I will see you next time.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining me. And yeah, all the links,
Absolutely.
as mentioned before, guys, in the description below to these awesome channels. So definitely check them out. Send them some love. All right, man. Have a
All right,
great
man.
weekend.
You as well. Talk to you
We'll
soon.
talk again soon. All right, guys. And that just leaves the question for you. X-Men, should they be in the MCU? Comment down below and let us know all your thoughts and opinions on that.